the Keshe Foundation Spaceship Institute, teaching some plasma science. We're into the intermediate knowing. The subject today is Carbogen. My name is Alexander. I'm from Canada. It is October 31st, 2021. This is part of the Keshe Foundation North American Plasma Education Series. Welcome, one and all. I hope you enjoyed this session. We have, just in review, please remember that we have a need for a great many teachers. And as knowledge seekers, we are attracting many new knowledge seekers every day. But the mature knowledge seekers always need to have review, a realignment, a repeat, a reassessment, whatever you want to call it. Review is always good because we don't have much time to explain it to other people. And we have thousands of hours in our archives. How do we condense that? So we tried a year ago, October 14th, we started with the Brazilian community to do some public teaching. We started with the basic teaching. We went into intermediate teaching and advanced teaching. And we've completed 21 classes on that. We did that in the Brazilian community, Italian community, the Spanish community. And we are in the process of translating that for other communities as well. But this is only basic teaching. And so the extension of the basic teaching went into actually basic understanding. And it is still basic because we need to understand what we learned and see how it works with everything that we understand. And so we progressed to intermediate understanding and advanced understanding. And then what? Well, you know what? We had to go back to basics. And that basics was the basics of knowing, because we can't know everything. So some way we have to have a connection to the full knowledge. And we reviewed many of the basic subjects that we had in our society, in our education system currently as we know it. And we find that there is a positioning for all these subjects. And it is on the other side of the bridge, because now we're crossing the bridge into intermediate knowing. And an interesting subject came up. And the reason for it is because many knowledge seekers have used this word Carbogen, and it just kind of rolls off the tongue. And we didn't really understand what it meant, but it kind of fit with everything because we were talking about amino acid. And so we all know that amino acid comes from the combination of hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and carbon. And it's so many times we made this mistake. So I thought this would be a really good time to bring this subject up. But I opened up a real can of worms. So this is the beginning of the intermediate knowing. Please hang on to your seatbelts. So because we've crossed the bridge, you see, so we are now combining what we learned from the intermediate teaching, the intermediate understanding, and now we're going into the intermediate knowing. We have to cross that bridge and get to the other side, because we are all plasma scientists, and we always have been plasma scientists. So whether we recognize it or not, but for most of us, including yours truly, we're going into uncharted waters. So we've been living kind of underwater in our own little tiny perfect world, and there's a whole world out there, and we can see it. All we have to do is look into the sky and we can see it, or we can see it with a microscope, or we can see it with a telescope. There's a whole world out there that we really don't understand very much about. And so we can't know everything, but we need to know a connection, because there are basic things that we want to know with respect to our lives. And one of the things, obviously, is the purpose of our lives. So it is unbelievable to believe that we have no purpose. So let's start and review with terminology. We understand magnetical and gravitational are the basis. And this is a natural science. That's why it's natural plasma. And we have, in order to cross the bridge, as we've seen with some of the videos today, that GANS is an important component. But GANS itself is still in the physical state, you see. But it is a representative of energy in motion. And as such, energy in motion always carries a charge, and it goes through various geometries. And each geometry fits in a particular dimension. And so there are multiple dimensions. And so one of the dimensions, of course, is the physical state. And we were able to progress to the monatomic state. And then we progressed to the GANS state. And there are gradients of energy flow. And this causes a dynamism. And that dynamism increases with the higher the energy state that we go into. So this was our basic terminology. And it is so wonderful. And I'm just going to pick on the Brazilian community because we've had so much confusion, double talk, and using the wrong words in the wrong context. And I must compliment the Brazilian community because they have worked extremely hard. And it's so wonderful to see the progress, using the right words in the right context, conveying the right meaning with the right intention, and having success after success after success. It's not the only community. The Iranian community is larger. The Chinese community is larger. But you know what? It's a model. And this is, we are all have models to follow. And this is the way forward because we can choose our paths. So when we look at our Earth and how it's related to the rest of the universe, the rules are the same. Energy comes in and energy goes out. In order to maintain that energy, it has to go around. But if we're not tuned in to what we're doing, then that energy just goes right through. So it's as if we don't even see that energy. We don't even know that it exists. And this is how most of us are actually passing through our lives. There's a whole lot of stuff going on that we are not even aware of. But we are in the process of doing all this. We are part of what we call the attraction and repulsion process. And that is a reflection of the magnetical gravitational field forces, isn't it? And then, so when we repel, that's what we're emitting, and we emit what we are. Isn't that right? So what we, sorry, just a moment, please. I'm having some technical difficulties here.
No problem. I looked up the word carbogen. It's not in the dictionary.
Well, yes, it is.
Oh, the plasma dictionary. I need a copy of that.
No. I got an awakening only about 24 hours ago, and that was a shock because you see, the subject of Carbogen is something that I brought up in my mind about 2 weeks ago to discuss. And then I started to do some review, and I found other things. And then I found another thing, and that was a shocker. So it's kind of important because energy is flowing through emission and absorption. And so the question becomes, if I planned this 2 weeks ago, but I found the solution yesterday, and within those 2 weeks, I spent a lot of time contemplating about this. And I'm not a scientist. I'm not on the research group. I don't have a career in the scientific community. I found this information within the last 2 weeks. So my question is, those who have a career as scientists, as professors, as researchers, you have a whole career to discover. So something is wrong. Something is wrong. We are just not finding out what is going on between our surface of the planet and the sky. The sky we call the magnetosphere. So everything that is happening within there is happening based on susceptibility. The susceptibility of this information is what is going through the universe as well. So we just get a kind of a glimpse of what is going on here. And so we see that, well, really in the universe, we've been saying that nothing is there, but that's not true, because nothing is nothing, cannot be nothing. It always has to be something, and something is always something, well, as opposed to being something else. And so here we look at the pictures of the GANs in our bottles, and we find that there's the beginning of a rotating field on the left-hand picture, but on the right-hand picture, it is matured into a hole in my GANs. There's a hole in my GANs. And so you can't say that there's nothing there, because the rest of the bottle is full of water. So if the GANs was displaced, well, then maybe the water came in, but something caused the hole. And so maybe the question should be, is there a soul in the hole? We looked at the books of Mr. Kesh, book number 1, The Universal Order of Creation of Matter. We now are mature to the point where we can talk about this in greater detail, because all this matter, antimatter, dark matter, and matter, is in a plasmatic state. This is the basis of the plasma science, the plasma matter. That's what we're talking about. And somehow that matter is here, and that matter came from somewhere. And now we know that we can go from here to somewhere else as well. And so this was discussed in book number 2, The Structure of Light. And then, of course, book number 3, which is The Origin of the Universe. Well, if the origin of the universe came from something, did it come from matter? Or did the matter create the universe? Or we can ask this question in many different ways. But the fact of the matter is, what we can talk about is say, well, the creation of the universe exists from energy. And that energy is always in motion. So as such, it has a charge. But we have a singularity where we had the creation of the matter with the converging field forces coming together into one field force. And then on the right-hand side, we have 2 field forces that are interacting together. And so energy is going from one to the other, but it's also going back again. And how does it do that? So, and this has always been a discussion, and to understand as knowledge seekers how this energy moves, and is there more to the principal matter than just what we see physically? So is there something in the background? And yes, there is. The PM ticks, the energy in motion, the energy that is flowing throughout the universe in all different flavors, all different sizes, and all different strengths of field strength. And as they come together, they look for a common denominator, not the lowest common denominator, a common denominator. And through that, they create a force field interaction. When they achieve a balance, we call that a maggrav. So this is the essence of creation. And the essence of creation, as we understand it, we relate to it very easily to the physical state, but there's something in the background. And we need to understand what's in the background. And now that we've crossed the bridge, we understand what it means. When we talk about transmission, that is the rotation on the x-axis. When we talk about transition, that's going from the ground to the sky or going through the poles. That's the y-axis. But transmutation, this is what we need to discuss, because that discusses field strength, and that involves what we call the z-axis. So those are your basic 3 dimensions, of which we are none of those 3 dimensions. We are in the plasma state. And so the plasma is at the core, and as such, it is always seeking a position. And that position is interacting with another plasma. And that interaction of these 2 plasmas creates a dynamism, which is the basis of your dynamic plasma. And all of this follows the rules of energy and motion and the charges associated with it. And the most important thing to understand that it's a two-way street. And as such, it has to have 2 points. And so we find that as we go through our soul dimensions, they have a geometry. And in fact, we have more than one soul. And as such, there's a connection, and the emotions are the connection. And so they involve a creation and a co-creation and an interaction between the souls and the realities. And in that dimension, whatever that dimension is, there is a range. But when we look at the range on Earth, we are in the physical range. That is the lowest range. But we can operate in a higher field strength by transcending into a higher energy state and still remain within the range. And this method of transcendence is also available to us in other ranges. And so if you're in the range, you can do this. And if you're out of range, well, then you have to, shall we say, transmute. And that transmutation is what takes us past our physical limitations. And so what we see, these physical limitations that we have self-imposed are soul limitations. But the soul doesn't have limitations. So our interpretation and understanding of the soul imposes the limitations. And so we discuss that in the basic knowing. But now in the intermediate knowing, we have to understand that the soul of the man can go through a transmutation. And that transmutation is a plasmatic transformation. There's also a physical transmutation, and that allows us to have a transportation vehicle, which we call the body, which is governed by the soul of the body. And so that transportation vehicle, which is our body, is within the transportation vehicle known as the earth. And based on the current knowledge, we see that the earth is our tiny little perfect world. And it's the earth that we're using to transport ourselves through the universe. Well, we have our own transportation vehicle, and now we have greater awareness and a greater science that is available to us, because what it is doing is allowing us to transmutate into different ranges. And each of these ranges has different energy states. Each of these ranges has different energy states. Each of these ranges has a different energy state. So if we're looking at the universe, we can see physicality. We know on Earth we have a physicality, but we can't seem to get from here to there. So there are transmutation stages. The fundamental transmutation stages is the transformation of the soul of the man. And the one that we're very familiar with is the soul of the body, which has a transportation vehicle known as our body. And we all know how important our body is, because we devote an awful lot of time to physical exercise, supplements, diet, all sorts of things that enable our bodies to perform so much better. And yet we are, what is it now, 21, 22 months into a pandemic, which all the king's soldiers couldn't put Humpty Dumpty back together again. I think Humpty Dumpty doesn't need to be glued. I think Humpty Dumpty needs to know the fundamentals of attraction and repulsion. These are the magnetical field forces, the basic magnetical field forces. They work in our range, They work in any range. Same thing. There's a natural creation, there's a natural decay. But the natural creation is plus the attraction repulsion forces that create a MAGRAV condition. So if we're deciding, are we magnetical or gravitational, it's in addition to the MAGRAV condition, which is the combination of the attraction repulsion balancing of the forces. So we have a MAGRAV condition plus a magnetical condition. We have a MAGRAV condition plus a gravitational condition. We call it natural creation or natural decay. When we go into a higher field strength, that's creation. When we go into a lower field strength, that is natural decay. However, it's a two-way street. So in actuality, decay is a creation. It's a physical creation. And just for the terminology's sake, it's best to say that the magnetical field forces are an emission and the gravitational field forces are an absorption. And we see that through the ray creation as discussed in Mr. Kesh's books. We will look at the Kesh model of the nuclear decay of the neutron. And so when the neutron will, through a decaying process, will actually break down into an electron-proton combination. And that electron-proton combination is always working together. But the mass of the electron and the proton combination does not equal the mass of the neutron. And so the difference there has to do with the release of the PM ticks. And the PM ticks are the rays that are abundant throughout the universe. So there we have a difference. We have a decay of the neutron and we have a creation. Oh, so the ray motion is part of the creation, right? So when we have through the natural decay of the neutron, we have a natural creation. And then through the natural creation of the ray comes from the natural decay of the neutron. So it's a two-way street, right? And so we understand that the rays are magnetical and the combination of the rays are gravitational. And so there is a connection in between, and that is the transition zone. And that is the connection zone. And so we've gone from a ray in motion to a construct of an X, Y, and Z axis, of which we are none of these three, right? Because we are looking at it. So in other words, when we're looking at principal matter, these are PM ticks that are going through the universe as energy packs. And they're going all over the place. It's diverging all over the universe. And when they have a common field force, they come together. And we call those field forces antimatter, dark matter, and matter. In plasma science, the antimatter is the principal matter. In the dark matter becomes the transition matter. And the matter itself becomes the convergence of all of these energies. They convert together and convert into a plasma. That plasma becomes a balanced condition, which is gravitational. We call it a MAGRAV condition. And that MAGRAV condition then has an opportunity to interact with another plasma field, which is our Earth. And that interaction is called inertia. So this is the basis of energy exchange. And it all comes about through attraction and repulsion, what we call gravitational and magnetical field forces of convergence and divergence. Okay, well, what is the impetus? So there has to be some kind of independent variable which differentiates between the attraction and the repulsion, isn't there? And then furthermore, what we have to understand is that the universe is interdependent. Well, how can you be interdependent and be independent at the same time? Well, you see, because it's a two-way street. The universe has a plasmatic effect on you, and you have a plasmatic effect on the universe. So when we look at the cups of life, there are two cups of life. They're the same, but they're different. So one cup is our zinc plate and copper coil, and a nano-coated copper coil that creates a magnetical gravitational field. But the second cup, now we switch the zinc plate for a copper plate, and it still has a magnetical gravitational field. But see, these two cups, they're different, because when we compare the two, and that's the only time that you can see the difference, is you see that one is emotional and one is physical. And if we're using that for the pandemic, then, keep them 1 meter apart. But once you've done that and overcome those problems, and we need to still focus on overcoming those problems, you can put the cups together and they become the cups of life. And collectively, the emotional and physical balance of the cups of man create a maggrav condition. In other words, it has a magnetical gravitational field. And by adding the third component, which is the cup of soul, each cup ends up with a magnetical gravitational field and a soul, and the collective of the three cups together has a magnetical gravitational force field and a soul. Now you have a maggrav condition, a dynamic plasma condition that is interacting with another plasma condition, which happens to be our Earth. And so the representation of that interaction is the cup of inertia, where we're using 2 nano-coated copper coils and 1 nano-coated copper plate, and we still get the magnetical gravitational field. And what are we interacting with? Well, we're acting with the Earth. So the representation of the Earth is the cup of the Earth, but we're introducing a new component here. We have a nano-coated zinc coil, nano-coated iron coil, and a nano-coated copper plate. And so we create a magnetical and gravitational field. And so this is how we're producing GANs, which may or may not be visible. And interestingly enough, different formulas create different things. So for instance, in the ceramic cups of life that we are producing, and you can't tell the difference between a regular teacup and a ceramic cup of life. They all look the same, they're kind of made the same way, but there is a formula that is embedded in there of GANs that makes one ceramic cup sweet, one current ceramic cup to deal with pressure, and one ceramic cup to deal with the general life-giving forces that we all seek with respect to our emotional and physical vitality. This all has to do with our understanding so that we can obtain the freedom and emancipation of humanity. And the first step is to break the chains. So when we look at the physicality, we see that there's a physical link. But when we get into the nano state, we find that we can create a link and be monatomic, but still be interdependent. And so this becomes the unchaining of man. And we should be able to understand that, because you see, when we go to sleep at night, we are free to travel, although our body remains chained to the earth. And so this is, shall we say, a representation of what goes on when we go to sleep at night and how our soul travels. So the thing is that the soul can leave and the soul knows to come back, because there's a connection. And that connection, when you put all the cups together, all 5 cups together, they collectively have a magnetical gravitational field force, and they collectively represent themselves as one soul. In this case, this soul is the soul of the body, because we are on our physical earth. And as such, we have cleverly figured out the periodic table of elements. And there is on the right-hand side, we have our inert gases, and our left-hand side, we have other elements. And as they progress through the various stages, vertically and horizontally, they have different masses. And so they all have a kind of a sequence. But there is one common thing. They're all in elementary. That's what elements are. They are elementary, and life is much more complex than that. So the point is that the sum of the parts is greater than the sum of the parts. And that's why you can discuss either knowing the details or the details of knowing. And if you have the time, you can work with the details, but we don't have the time unless we devote a career to each and every detail. So one of the best things is just to have the details of knowing. And one of the basic things that is existent in our life is the difference between an aerobic and an anaerobic condition. So with an aerobic condition, we say that oxygen is presence. And we can see that when we review the ganses, which are CO2 GANs, ZNO GANs, and CuO GANs, and these are the common ganses that we have in the basic teachings. These are not the only ganses. Every element on the periodic table is capable of having a GANS. So these are just the basic aerobic ganses that come to our attention in these teachings. But there are anaerobic ganses, right? And that means they don't have oxygen, they are supplemented with hydrogen. And so one of these ganses is CH3, which is made with the iron GANs. And the key point is not that it has the H, is that the oxygen is absent. So we either have oxygen or we don't have oxygen. And so this becomes a very, very important point when we understand the periodic table of elements. So there are many ways to reposition these periodic tables. And so what I'd like to do is move over the left two columns and move them over to the right-hand side. And I just want to draw your attention to the fact that when we look at the boundary between the copper and the zinc, although they're neighbors, there is definitely a gap there. There's definitely a difference. And all the other elements go from there from, and they go in both directions. And so frankly, you can see if this periodic table was a tube, that you could start on the right and follow the tube to the left and come back to the right. But you could do that the opposite. Start on the right, go to the left and come back to the right. So you follow that tube, and we're going to drop a lot of the other elements and just concentrate on the elements that we've been talking about through the basic teachings. And so our environment, which is a salt, we have sodium, potassium, magnesium, and calcium, salts, all salts. That's on the right-hand side. And then we already mentioned the copper and the zinc and the iron as part of ganses. But today we're going to focus on hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and carbon. And of course, we have this schizophrenia with hydrogen, that it's maybe on the left-hand side of the inert gases and maybe it's on the right-hand side of the inert gases. And the outstanding thing about the hydrogen, of course, is that it doesn't have a neutron. So because of that, the periodic tables of elements and the numbering system is not based on neutron mass, but on the proton mass. So there's the proton numbers. So hydrogen has 1 proton, oxygen has 8 protons, nitrogen has 7, and carbon has 6. Okay, well, an interesting thing happens is that some of these periodic table elements are called halogens. And so in a free state, these halogens exist as diatomic molecules. So atoms are elemental, molecules are a combination. So you combine 2 atoms together and it creates a molecule. And in this particular group, we see that fluorine, chlorine, bromine, iodine, and acetine are part of what we call the halogens. But the halogens, I don't want to talk about the halogens. I want to talk about the amino acids. And we all know that in the construction of the amino acids, which we learned a long time ago in the basic teachings, are constructed of carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, and nitrogen. And the reason they're in the sequence is so that we look at the first letter of each name, and it's a memory aid where we can see Mr. Cohn, C-O-H-N. So we can remember the elements of the amino acids. But what's wrong with this picture is that these are all the same field strength. What is right about this picture is that these amino acids are in a star formation. These amino acids, of course, have an affinity. And so each component of an amino acid has a function. So we say the nitrogen is the facilitator, and the hydrogen, of course, is magnetical. Well, if the hydrogen is magnetical, we know the oxygen is gravitational. So the carbon is the connector. And so we see that, well, isn't this interesting? The nitrogen and the hydrogen are gases, and the carbon is charcoal. And somehow we have oxygen that it's on every level. And one of the things that we know, yes, we have oxygen at the ground level, but we also have oxygen, a special kind of oxygen at the magnetosphere, which we call ozone. And that is of a different structure. So let's work up towards that structure, shall we? So when we look at the basic periodic table of elements, so the elements, really, they're all hydrogen. It's just convenient to have a name. So instead of calling it hydrogen 6 or hydrogen 7, we call it carbon or nitrogen. And hydrogen 8, of course, is oxygen, but you see that they're all arithmetic sequences. So fundamentally, we could say that by changing these elements, we could say, we know that nitrogen is 7, so it's 1 less than oxygen. So if we add a hydrogen to the nitrogen, that becomes oxygen, right? 7 plus 1 is 8. But interestingly, if we take a hydrogen from the nitrogen, it becomes carbon, right? 7 minus 1 is 6. And, you know, we have to really state the obvious. Nitrogen is about 81% of the atmosphere. So there's a reason for that, right? It's kind of fundamental. And we as breathers, and breathing means we are living in an aerobic environment, we breathe oxygen in and we exhale carbon dioxide out. Interestingly here, the hydrogen is missing. Okay, but I'd like to bring up another point, and that is that, so we say that carbon is 6 and the oxygen is 8. So if we have 6 and 8, that equals 14. And I want you to remember that number, okay? Because when we look at oxygen, we say that oxygen has 16 electrons. Well, electrons and protons work together. So if it has 16 electrons, does it have 16 protons? No, it has 8 protons, oxygen 8. So what supports the other 8 electrons? Well, it's 8 neutrons. It's the field strength of the 8 neutrons. I'm not sure if there are 8 neutrons, but as I said, I'm not a scientist. So for the purposes of this diagram, we can see that the neutron field strength and the proton field strength supports the 16 electrons. And so when we look at the carbon, well, it has 12 electrons. So the 12 electrons are supported by 6 protons and the field strength of 6 neutrons. And so, as I said, carbon and oxygen, the combination of which is 14, right? Carbon 6 plus oxygen 8 is 14. So this is a better representation of the amino acid because it's indicative of the field strength. Obviously, oxygen 8 is bigger than nitrogen, and nitrogen is bigger than carbon, and carbon is bigger than hydrogen. So in this diagram, the oxygen is blue, the nitrogen is green, the carbon is black, and hydrogen is red. Well, when we look at nitrogen and what it means, it was first discovered in 1772. So I would say that's 4 years before the United States was formed. And it was discovered by, there's these Scottish people again, another Scottish physician, Daniel Rutherford, 1772. But, you know, guess what? The nitrogen is part of a group that's called p-nictogens. And it is always with a partner. So it's called dinitrogen. Oh, okay. So as a gas, nitrogen is N2. Okay. So as a gas, we now have 2 nitrogens. All right. Now there's another group, chalcogens or chalcogens. I don't know how to pronounce this, but it's a group in what we call in the periodic table, group 16, and it is called chalcogens because most of the copper ores have copper in the form of oxides and sulfides. And there's a small amount of selenium and tellurium. And so the ores of copper are called chalcos in Greek. And we know gen is generation. So they're called chalcogens. And oxygen is a member of this group. And it's a highly reactive non-metal. Well, it's an oxidizing agent that forms oxides. And it forms that with most elements as well as with other compounds. So the other thing is that oxygen as a gas always comes in pairs. So we have nitrogen that is a gas in pairs. Oxygen as a gas is in pairs. Okay, well, guess what? Hydrogen is a gas and it also comes in pairs. But it is the lightest of all the elements, right? And it's colorless, odorless, non-toxic, highly combustible, and it has an atomic number of 1, but it comes in pairs. Okay, well, as a gas, the nitrogen, oxygen, and hydrogen comes in pairs. Well, charcoal is carbon. So when we look at carbon, well, that's solid, not very gassy, is it? And we see that carbon is on our nanocoating, and it's black. We know that graphene is a single layer of carbon, and it's black. Diamonds, well, that's a diamond structure, is very solid. In fact, it's known as the most solid element or material on this planet, and it's made from 8 carbons, not carbonate, but 8 carbonates. So the diamond structure is very strong. The diamond structure is measured as sp2 or sp3, and we find that sp2 and sp3 are on the nano coating. And then we also find we're using carbon for graphite, which we all have in our pencils, and we use it for other purposes. And then, of course, the most abundant use of carbon is charcoal, which we like to burn. And so how does that get into be a gas? So I brought up the subject today of carbogen. Well, I planned on doing this 2 weeks ago, but yesterday, and Mark, you said that you couldn't find it in the dictionary. Well, in Wikipedia, carbon is a gaseous mixture of carbon and oxygen. Oh, and it is used in medical settings, and it is used in conjunction with radiation therapy. It's also called Meduna's mixture. The inventor was Ladislaus Meduna. And it is a mixture, you see, not an element. It is a mixture of carbon dioxide and oxygen gas. Well, carbon dioxide is CO2 and oxygen gas is O2. So the way they mix this is through force. They actually force the two gases together under pressure. And interestingly enough, the Carbogen formula is CO4. So in order for a gas to be part of the amino star, it can't be charcoal. It has to be a gas, but there is no such thing as a carbon gas. So carbon as a gas comes as a CO2. And if we see the carbon gas as a CO2 and the oxygen gas as an O2, there's our CO4, isn't it? And when we look at the connections, when we see that the connection of a carbon and an oxygen comes out with a mass number, element number 14, and two nitrogens come together, 7 plus 7 is 14. So one of the discussions we could say, well, if I add a hydrogen to the nitrogen, it becomes an oxygen. So 7 plus 1 is 8. And then if I remove a hydrogen from the one nitrogen, then it becomes 7 minus 1, carbon 6. So the nitrogen could, through a reaction, become oxygen, carbon. But oxygen always comes in pairs. So this would kind of be wonky, you see, because all of these pairs are in balance, aren't they? So you have one nitrogen balancing another nitrogen, one oxygen balancing another oxygen, one hydrogen balancing another hydrogen. So you can't balance a carbon and an oxygen unless you add another oxygen. So in fact, the oxygens are balanced, but they have a carbon sandwich. And so now you have the four gases that make up the amino star, right? And why is that important? Well, you see, because at the magnetosphere, we have plasmatic nitrogen, which interacts with the PM ticks that are traveling through the universe. And it has an interaction between the plasmatic field forces of the sun that is interacting with the plasmatic field forces of the earth. And those plasmatic field forces are the manifestation of the plasmatic reality, which we see happening at the surface of the magnetosphere, where we have the plasmatic nitrogen. And we know that the PM ticks are created from electrons and protons, no neutrons. So as these PM ticks combine with the plasma nitrogen, and at that point we have an NH4, which is a tetrahedron, but there's no carbon and there's no oxygen. So the amino acid has these four components. So what does that mean? That means that the plasma nitrogen converts to plasmatic hydrogen, converts to plasmatic oxygen, converts to plasmatic carbogen. You see, because the amino acid comes from the plasmatic air. So this would now make sense. It's one of the reasons we're always making this mistake. What are the components of amino acid? Well, it's nitrogen, hydrogen, oxygen, and carbogen. It just comes rolling off the tongue. And what is astounding is that when we look at the body center tetrahedrons that are kind of important, we see the organs of the body are structured that way. The endocrine system is structured that way. And we look at some gases like methane gas, it's CH4. We look at the Earth's crust, very solid, silicon O4. And then we look at the surface on the magnetosphere, NH4. The constitution of our blood, the basic, is iron, O4. And then, of course, chlorophyll, which is kind of what the vertical people need. That's magnesium, N4. And then phosphate, which is very important. That's PO4. And now we have carbogen, which is CO4. And we see how our mag-rev reactors are made. And we see how the tetrahedrons have plasmatic fields, which become face-centered. And so, just saying. So when we look at the backbone of the DNA and the backbone of sugar, we see that the carbon is in a sugar phosphate backbone. So PO4 is the basis of the carbon backbone. Okay. And we know that humans have backbones. Jellyfish do not. Just saying. We look at the elements of the DNA. There are 4 basic elements, cytosine. And when we look at the components, first of all, there's no sugar. They're in a hexagonal formation. And what do you see? COHN. And we look at thymine, no sugar. And what do we see? COHN. And when we look at adenine, there is sugar. So we have both a hexagonal format and a pentagonal format. But all the components are the same, except oxygen is missing. But guanine has sugar, but it has the 1 oxygen. And all the other 3 components are there. So when we're looking at the basic DNA and the combination, so there's an interaction between the RNA and the DNA, but it's in a helical structure. So a helical structure is a rotating field, but that's a rotating field that is constantly moving. And so not only is there a connection of those 4 amino acids, but the energy goes both ways. And there are many, many connections. And then when we progress down the line, we get into essential fatty acids, and we find that what are the basic components? Oh, COHN. There it is again. And we find that through the process of the bending, we create different energy fields. And the combination of this bending and the combination of the amalgamation of these force fields produces water. What do we know about water? Water comes from the production of protein. Isn't that interesting? So when we're talking about other terminologies, in addition to the basic terminology, so we discussed principal matter and how we can create amino acids. Well, the amino acids, they come from nowhere. They come from thin air. But that's not true. They come from the fat air. And in order to be in the fat air, they have to be gaseous. So carbogen is gaseous, and carbon is the connection between the gases and the physicality. So the carbogen is part of the structure of the amino acids, which come in star formations, and they begin the basis of a plasma state, advancing to a dynamic plasma state. And beyond that, there's a residue and a conversion. And so this becomes the essence of matter plasma. So it's the matter plasma that becomes dominant in our tiny perfect world. That is the matter state, which is physical, because we can touch it and we can see it. Now, we talk about clarity and confusion. Well, maybe we can say that the plasmatic matter state is actually mattergen. Maybe the mattergen, which is in the plasmatic state, which we cannot touch and cannot see, but we can sense it. So the question still remains, which is the dominant matter state for you, and which is the common denominator for you? And so this is the basis that we see how to break the soul limitations. So we have to elevate the soul. Well, in order to elevate the soul, we have to elevate our thinking and to understand that, we are no longer dependent on our own tiny, perfect little physical world. There is another world that's out there. And so we can change this through energy. So energy packs create a charge gradient, and that gradient varies. It can be steeper or it can be shallower. But the gradient charge allows us to have a direction of flow. And so the creation of life, the building blocks of life on this planet are the amino acids. And our success in creating these amino acids and continuing to create these amino acids affect our lifespan. So we find that the basis of these energy packs as they're moving through the universe is one for the spirit and one for the soul, and two for the combination of the two. Okay, so where 1 and 1 is more than 2, and this is the plasma math. And so we see when we created GANs, where did the GANs come from? It didn't come from a physical reaction. It didn't come from a chemical reaction. It came from a plasmatic reaction. We set up the pattern and we derived the energy. And the energy manifests itself into what? Carbon dioxide GANs. The carbon dioxide GANs is a physical manifestation of what? Of a gaseous state. What about the zinc oxide? A physical manifestation of a gaseous state. What about the copper oxide? A physical manifestation of a gaseous state, right? And we were able to do that by creating a pattern between two different energy states. One was a physical matter and one was the nano-coated copper. Now, what's the third state? The third state was the GAN state. And none of those states were the state of the creation. The creation came from the thin air. And all the cups in the 5-cup system are created the same way. It's not just the thin air, it's the fat air. And we know it's the fat air because on the surface is the amino acid. So this is the road to trying to discover how the cup of the universe works, because the cup of the universe has all of these elements of the individual cups of life, right? So the individual cups of life are kind of like the elements on the periodic table of elements. But when you look at the cup of the universe, it's a combination of all of these forces coming together. And they're all governed by some kind of independent variable. So we can take a physical inventory, and we've done that. But the first two are the most important in this discussion because we have CuO GANs and a ZNO GANs. So these are the only two elements that are in a GANs condition already. And then we have connections. Well, we haven't discussed the connections, but we see that there is a physical connection and a physical sequence that we can go through. And these physical connections of wires can be bare or can be nano-coated. And so this is subjects in the future to discuss. And we looked at the chemical inventory, and we found that this environment has a lot to play in that. And so we can change the environment. And we talked about sodium, potassium, magnesium, calcium. And so these are all these inventories. That's our kit. And it's just like, you know, having a musical kit. And you put the musical kit on stage, where's the band? And even with the band, where's the music? Okay, so this is what we want to do. We want to start playing the music. And in order to understand that, we have to start to see how things work in combination. So where things are and how we sorted things out, excuse me, we finished off understanding the difference between what is leeward and what is windward. And so in other words, we had to cross the watershed. And the watershed has to do with some missing ingredients. These are the questions that we don't understand. Are these missing ingredients moral, or are they chemical? Are they plasmatic, or are they physical? And then we find that the gas does some of these funny things that physics and chemistry cannot explain. And so the physical subjects that we grew up with, they're actually out of range. All right. So what range are they in? Well, the range that they are in is the post-amino acid range. In other words, after the creation of amino acids, because there's a sequence from the amino acids is the DNA, which we discussed today. From the DNA comes the fatty acids. Yeah, we discussed that as well. And then we see the protein on the tops of the cups of life. And then we have cell creation and then more complex cells. These are all post-amino acid. And so we start with a simple and unstable formation. And as it becomes more complex, it becomes more stable. So now we understand our relationship and saying, well, you know what? The physical subjects that we went through the past 6 weeks, they're all on the leeward side, and they're all very gravitational, but they're also of the lowest energy state. What we are on this side, we are in the pre-amino acid stage, okay? And so the pre-amino acid stage and the study of nuclear decay is really the same thing because it's an exchange of energy. And so we have manifestation from a gaseous state into a physical state. And so the pre-amino acid is a carbogen, because the carbogen is the connector between our plasma and physical reality. So as all detectives as plasma scientists, we're looking for clues, trying to figure out how things work, and always basis on seeing is believing. Well, we seen a hole in the Gantz, didn't we? So you better start believing, because that is unlimiting the possibilities. When you ask the question why, you understand why is the answer. It's the evidence that you're not seeing that is the evidence of something that is happening. So when we look at the cups of life, we see, wait a second, we put in physical things. We put in a zinc plate, a copper plate, a nano-coated copper coil. Zinc plate copper coil and nano-coated copper coil. We put it in an environment of a saline solution, and we derived a zinc Gantz, a copper Gantz, a CO2 Gantz, amino acid, and water. Okay, well, how does that relate to the cup of the universe? Well, the two components in the middle. One is a Gantz-coated copper, and the other is a zinc-coated, is a Gantz-coated zinc. So the copper is nano-coated, the zinc is nano-coated, and then both of them are Gantz-coated. And together, they create an environment, right? And it create an interaction. And at the center is the soul of the man. Well, the soul of the man is not physical. And when we look inside the brain, well, we do have some kind of physical structure, but there is an energy interaction. So when we look at the cup of the universe, we said, well, there's a copper GANs and there's a zinc GANs. Well, what does that create? That creates a carbogen. Carbogen is the precursor for the carbon GANs. And so this is the beginning. This is the beginning of the breakdown of the cup of the universe. So we understand that when we are dealing with ideas and when we are dealing with emotions, they are not physical. And what we're seeking is some kind of creature comfort. And so that comes through the physical and emotional enhancement of our vitality. And this is where we have ideas and wishes and the courage to fulfill our wishes and the love of our fellow man and the love of the universe, okay? Because all things are working in combination. So as we are the independent variable, we are interdependent with everything else, because the plasmatic interaction, which is all things in combination, and hence the infinity loop, which is a representation of the magnetical pushing and pulling and the gravitational pushing and pulling. Yeah, both. And the balance of is the Magrav condition. So the Magrav condition is a balanced state, but nothing is stationary. Everything's in motion. So therefore there has to be a residue. So it's the magnetic Magrav condition plus the residue. And so when we look at the environment and what is the difference between our gaseous state, what is the difference between our liquid state, and then how do we get into our physical state? And so we see the backbone is created with a CaCO3 gas, the calcium gas, right? And so there's a lot going on in there. And the reason there's a lot going on in there is because what we see is the neutron mass, which is the physicality, but what it doesn't add up. And so the new math is saying, well, we understand there's a proton mass and an electron mass, but now we have a mass of the PM ticks, which is the energy that is coming and going all the time, plus the total mass of the matter gen. The matter gen, the matter that is generated from the plasmatic condition, from the principal matter and the transition matter. So the totality is achieved through the energy level balance and positioning of all of these elements. So when we say about nuclear decay does not mean rottenness. Nuclear decay is a method of nuclear creation. And so the transformation, the transmutation and into a transformation is via the carbogen. And the connector can go to the next level, which is the transportation. And so we have the rules on our tiny little perfect world, which we call the universe, man's universe. That is only tiny. That's nowhere near perfect. The ticket has to go in other areas. So the purpose of today's class is really to put forward a proposal. We want to expand the plasma terminology because it's a unique terminology. We have to have clarity and not have confusion. Carbon is a solid. Carbogen is a gas, and the gas is part of the matter gen, and the matter gen is part of the plasma gen. So I submit to you a proposal, and I ask it to be adopted by the knowledge seekers as we add to our vocabulary. So when we look at the principal matter, we see that the PM ticks, which is a plasma terminology, these are energy packs that are diverging all over, and they combine together into a force field that is the principal matter, the transition matter, and the matter gen, which in its convergence converts into plasma gen. And so the plasma gen is the precursor for the Magrav condition, which is a gravitational condition, which also interacts with another gravitational condition, the plasma fields of the Earth. And that combination and interaction is called inertia. And so we all want to get back to nature, but the point is we are nature. We just have to understand that we've now crossed a bridge. We are looking at it from the right side. the right side is that the souls dictate the terms and the souls know the rules. We as students, as knowledge seekers, we have to learn these rules. So when someone asks you, what is plasma? Tell them it's a kind of energy state, and it's transcending the limitations of the science that we know. And frankly, it's extremely important. So our point of view has to be we as participants on this earth. So we as souls, we have our own transmutation of our soul energies into our wishes, hopes, and dreams, and the transmutation into our physicality, which is our body, which is working with the hopes and wishes, yes, of the earth, the environment, and its matter state. So every time we talk about manifestation, we can see when we look at the stacker unit that there is a kind of reality. So all these fields come together and they form another. Any formation of any field is a manifestation, and it's the plasma feeding which leads to this manifestation. So now we know that a manifestation can be non-tangible or tangible, non-visible or visible, and so therefore plasmatic or physical. But a plasmatic reality does not have to be a physical reality, but a physical reality must be a plasmatic reality first. Any kind of manifestation is a form artifact. And so just because you can't see it, it still remains a form artifact. So now we know that the emotional presence is also a form artifact. An artifact of what? Energy in motion. And so when we look at the stacker unit, it's representative not only of the vertical life, but we are part of the horizontal life, but we walk vertically. And we are made of a matter-gen state. And as such, we are feeding energy. Higher feeds the lower, right? And that is always energy interacting. So when we look at our stacker unit, and that is our backbone of what? The soul of the body. And so when we look at the stacker units and how maybe they can be reconfigured into a feeding station, we are looking forward to plasma feeding stations, right? So we don't mean to just say that man-made is not working. It's the role of man, okay? So when man decides the rules of the universe, then man puts in limitations. But when the role of man is to involve the universe, work with the universe, understand the rules of the universe, then the role of man changes. And so we have the new technology, which is a tremendous facilitator for us. We have the vertical enhancement units, and we have the horizontal enhancement units. And what they do is they elevate the physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being of man. Because the way we're operating on this universe, we're binding up energies. And the reason we're doing that is because we're self-serving. And to be self-serving is always at the expense of others. That's not what we are doing in the plasma science. We're ending the abuse. We're ending the moral. The missing ingredient is the morality. We have to understand that the limitations on this planet has to do with our double-crossing actions, and to understand that just because we have a delay in consequences doesn't mean there are no consequences. The double cross is our eternal burden. And in many ways, we're all carrying this burden, and it's time to release that burden and elevate ourselves to understand that the essence of creation is the ethics of the universe, which involves morality, compassion, and courage. These are the elements of creation, and they all work together in a plasmatic basis. So when we look at the relationship of the universal cup and the stacker unit, we find that the universal cup has a greater affinity to the soul of the man, and the stacker unit has a greater affinity to the soul of the body. And so we find that the dynamic transfer state should we change that? Of course we should change that, because we're limited to our tiny little perfect world. And the universal cup has a relationship to the stacker unit, and that has to change. It can change, but does that mean the physical state is to be abandoned? We have new options. So we always say what goes around comes around. Well, yes, okay, but there's a reason for it, is because energy exchange is a two-way street. So what is done on the physical basis can be done on the plasmatic basis. So when you look at the Universal Council and its emblem, and you find that it is not physical, it is not plasmatic, it can be anywhere, because the universe is everywhere. And our first anniversary of the basic teachings was October the 14th, but also it was a massive announcement to the world that the new universe is at our feet, and they're waiting for us to come in. We are the independent variable, and we are the messengers of peace. This is the Keshe Foundation Spaceship Institute on Plasma Science. We're putting this technology in the public domain. We just asked for the World Peace Treaty to be signed, okay? And not just with a pen, but with the heart, with the soul, with the spirit. The physical and emotional harmony of this planet depends on it. Our physical and emotional harmony and our vitality depends on it. And as truth seekers, which is what happens as a knowledge seeker, you become patriotic difference makers. That is the logical outcome, because the truth shows the way. This is the universal language of knowing. And we become universal earth patriots, right? This is where the plasma science needs to be delivered in exchange for peace on earth. Welcome to the new space age. This is the end of the lesson. Thank you all for listening. Mark, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Alex. Again, a lot of knowledge has been conveyed here. And some of these things, as I said, I looked up Carbogen, but I didn't find it there. Maybe it's more in the medical terms. But is this something we're going to be using, Carbogen? I mean, as a term in the Keshe Foundation, or is this something that you sort of picked up and think we should?
That's part of my proposal.
Okay. And I did want to give you a break for a minute while you rest your voice, and of course, open up the floor to the others. Is there anyone who'd like to ask a question or share some knowledge about anything that Alex just conveyed to us? I know it's easy, or it's fairly easy, going from the fields to matter state, but Mr. Keshe said now we're going to be taking cells and converting them into energy, and this is going to be taught, I believe. So this is another topic or subject that I think Mr. Keshe is going to get into. I don't know if anyone has done that with cells or any other matter objects, converted them into energies. And maybe you have, and you'd like to share that with us. But while we give Alex a little break, I just wanted to make a note again and ask if there's anyone new here that would just like to say who they are, where they're from, and perhaps how you found the meeting. It looks like we see a couple names in there, but they may have been in other groups at other times. And of course, a couple other members of the Universal Council have joined us. One has dropped out, but Marie is still here. And we did open the floor up to the Universal Council members, Marie, earlier, if they wanted to add any comment, not that you have to, or you're even in the position to. You could be driving or anything else. But we give that opportunity for anyone who's new to come forward and let us know who you are and where you're from, or any of the Universal Council. And again, just to go into the Universal Council, or you see the other symbol behind certain person's name with USC, that just means they're a Universal Council supporter. So if any of those terms confuse you, let it not be so. And as Mr. Kesh had said, the Clown Act that's going on in the United Nations would be replaced by some very beautiful Universal Council members, and hopefully they will start making some policies that make sense on this planet. And again, we thank the Universal Council for their wishes, their excellent wishes. And this is one of the reasons these systems are being delivered now. So you can all apply to be a Universal Council supporter, or to be a Universal Council member, which there is an age limit of 60. So you can appoint yourself and fill out the application, which you can find. And I know Shweta has a lot of details on that. So if anyone would like to ask any questions, I see Salamia has her mic open. And
yes.
Is it a question for Alex?
For Alex, yes.
Beautiful.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Anderson. I'd like to ask Mr. Alex about emotion of presence as an artifact. So first question, what is an artifact in plasma science? How we can define an artifact in plasma science? And how is made, constructed emotion of presence from the energy in motion as an artifact? Thank you very much.
Good day, Salamia. Thank you for the question. The artifact is very easy to define because we can use archaeology as an example. So if you know they dig into the earth and they find these artifacts and they try and discern what was the society that was around this artifact. So one of the examples that I was using was these ceramic cups of life, which our ceramic cups are infused with GANs. So we assume that the previous societies, based on the artifacts, so we see, you know, there's an Iron Age and a Copper Age, and there's a Stone Age, and you know, we have cave dwellers, and we have people who, you know, burn with fire, and we discover a lot about the society from the clay artifacts that we find. Do we know if these ceramic or clay artifacts are infused with GANs? Do we know that? We know a lot, but we don't know how to build the pyramids. We don't know how they were built. But the thing is, the pyramid is an artifact. So, you know, it's hard to ignore, isn't it? And it's not just the pyramids in Egypt, but, you know, we have Machu Picchu in South America, and we have the Mayan ruins in Central America. There are many pyramids all around the world, too many to mention, but these are all artifacts, and they kind of don't really tell the story about the society that created these artifacts. So the artifact is a discovery from some kind of activity. Well, with respect to motivation, let's say you are a coach of say a soccer team, and so you have the physical players, you have the physical equipment, the physical kit, you have the field, and, you know, the other team shows up, but what is the driving force behind that? And you say, oh, you know, the team played well today, or the team didn't play well today. So there's an element that is missing. And generally speaking, it's the emotion that has a higher energy and it drives the physicality. So if you look at the result and you say, well, the team played really, really well. Well, the playing is only visible while the team is playing. Once the team stops playing, it's no longer visible. Same thing happens with music. When the music is playing, you experience emotion associated with that music. You may want to dance, which is a interpretation physically. But when that music stops, then it's gone. So the only time that is available is in that moment. And so what is the impetus to do that? So the creation of the music becomes an emotion of presence. The inspiration for a team to perform is the emotion of presence. And where does that emotion of presence come from? So if the emotion is a link between the soul and the physicality, then the wishes, the ideas that we have, is a link between the soul of the man and the brain. So that connection is the emotion. If the manifestation of that emotion into a physicality would have to come from a link between the soul of the body and the physical body. So there's an emotion there. So the emotion of the soul of the man would be the idea. The impetus to fulfill that emotion would be the interaction of the soul of the body. The combination of the emotion, the soul of the man and the soul of the body would be the emotion of presence, because all things work in combination. So if you look at the emotion of man and the emotion of the body as plasma fields, then you find that the combination of those two plasma fields becomes a dynamic plasma field, which we call the emotion of presence. So being an emotion, there is no physical tangibility, but there is a presence. We know that, okay? So that becomes a plasmatic manifestation, which we call the emotion of presence. And that emotion of presence is, shall we say, present on this planet. But that is a manifestation of emotion in the soul of the man and the soul of the body. And that is what is visible within our range on this planet. So are there other emotions which are substructure of those plasma emotions? And so the answer is yes. So as we've crossed the bridge to move away from the physicality, we have to look at the substructure. What is causing that physicality? And so one of the connections is the emotion of presence. And that emotion of presence is an artifact because it's there. And you know that it's there. Your soul knows that it's there. It's something that you can feel, even though you can't touch it. So that feeling we call a sense, a sensation. And that sensation, science calls that an anecdote. Oh, really? Well, I know I like a cherry cheesecake when I eat a cherry cheesecake. Okay, so I don't need any scientist to tell me that, you know, a cherry cheesecake tastes really well. So my emotion of understanding knows that. My emotion of physical satisfaction knows that. So anybody got a cherry cheesecake? Anyway, I don't mean to be talking about food while we're in this class, but we can satisfy our feeding with a plasma feeding. I hope I've answered your question. Thank you for your question. Excellent question. Thanks, Solomia.
Is there any response, Solomia, or I don't know if she may not be able to.
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you very much. Lovely. Yes. Just he explained lovely, and I will transfer to Romanian community because they asked me about what Mr. Alex understand by this notion.
You would probably like a chocolate cake more.
No.
Okay. Okay.
And
As French say, chacun son goût.
No, I'm satisfied with your answer. It's complete and illuminate me and other people. Thank you.
and Steph has put in the chat, thank you so much, with a looks like a rose to you, Alex. Kay has also added, thank you very much, Alex, for another beautiful teaching. God bless you in every lights. Olga says, very good, Alex. Thank you. And thank you, Alex, for your wonderful teaching from Francine. Raquel is translating from Mexico in the Hispanic community. So we should probably, and I wasn't really aware that someone was we're simulcasting this. So we should talk a little slower so that all of it can be translated. We want to thank Raquel. Of course, Shweta says thank you, Alex, as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. I don't speak well, but I understand, so I can translate for my community, Hispanic community.
Beautiful.
So we are, how many people we are here? We are 11. We start with 20, so they quit because I couldn't follow all the translate. So
that's no problem. Thank you for your service to the community. And isn't that one of the sayings that we use? We are here to serve and not to be served. And I think this will become more and more apparent as we become more and more detached from this physicality. So Alex, to fly, do I need to know everything forward and backward here of any of these teachings?
We will review this video later with someone who translates faster. So thank you.
Thank you very much for your work and all of our work. Yes, go ahead, Alex.
No, I just thank you so much for that. Appreciate it.
And as I was saying, the people shouldn't feel scared that they need to know all of this knowledge. And I think some of it is going to be added to us in a certain way. Mr. Kesh was saying something that I thought I heard, where when 4 people walk into, let's say, the flight enhancement system and the physicality, is it left behind? The knowledge of all the souls, which I thought he said contain most of the knowledge of the universe, will be then used and interacted among all 4. So perhaps the soul comes out because he, again, as he said, the soul has your soul, which you're carrying with you, which is built above and on top of the soul of the creator, contains pretty much most of the knowledge of the universe. So will we need to know every single detail about, let's say, creating a hydrogen gas or some other product or system that we need to build to get us to this point? Or is it more the detachment from the physicality? Do you think, Alex?
So we don't have time in our individual careers to learn about all the individual things, the details, as you say. all of these details collectively come together to create a body of knowledge that shows just how things work. And so for a lot of people, the evidence that they need will come in different forms. And the epiphany, when it comes together, which is kind of, when the light goes on and you say, oh, wow, all my life I thought about this way, and then suddenly I changed my point of view, and all of a sudden everything makes sense. And you know it makes sense because there's a tremendous emotional relief, a release of energy that has been bound up. And so this particular picture here shows that, our emotion and the soul of the man is bound up within our physical head. And in order for us to be able to travel, the higher energy has this capability. So the soul of the man has a higher energy state than the soul of the body. That's just the way it is. So we need to have the trust and the faith in this, and each of us will develop this in a different way. So each of us has our own journey and how to do that. So I'm not saying that I have, but all of these teachings are, shall we say, one point of discussion, one point of view, and hopefully it would help someone to have a different kind of viewpoint. So in other words, if you have a structural viewpoint, that by opening up these discussions, it breaks that structure, literally breaks it. Where do we see these type of analogies in our society? Women refer to a glass ceiling, the glass ceiling now, women getting into the boardrooms of the corporations around the world. They call that breaking the glass ceiling. So that's just a figure of speech. Well, these teachings are also breaking limitations and allowing us to look at how things work. So the big consternation is that, are the rules on this planet the same as the rules in the universe? And yes, they are. But there is one huge difference, and that is that in our physicality, we have a delay in consequences, and that is a natural byproduct of the reduction of field strength into our physicality. And too many of us, like way too many of us, have decided to abuse that. And so saying, well, because we can delay the consequences, then we don't have any consequences. But that is not the truth. And the only way that we can prolong that lie is to disconnect the two souls. And if we understand that there are two souls and that these two souls are interacting and communicating, then as we open up to the universal soul, the pressure comes on the physical soul, the soul of the body. And in order for the soul of the body to maintain, or shall we say disavow, the awareness of the plasmatic field forces, it has to create a shielding. And that shielding has to be extremely strong. And so it becomes extremely binding. And to maintain that binding energy, it has to be fed. And so if we feed that binding, and we need an enormous amount of energy to feed that binding, then the tendency is to steal it. And we not only steal it from others, but worst of all, we steal it from ourselves. And it's very difficult to maintain because it's man-made. In other words, it's unnatural. We say, well, if man made it, it should be natural. No, it's in a post-amino acid stage. It's in a physicality. And so to be in the physicality is not to disavow the plasmatic reality, but it's to understand that the plasmatic reality first manifests the physical reality. So if we insist on manifesting the plasma reality from the physical reality, it ain't going to happen. And so we have this chaos. And this chaos is not tolerated. So the universe does not tolerate hooliganism. And so we are in quarantine on this planet. And if we want to go beyond, then we have to interact. Our two souls have to interact. And our two souls have to understand that the best friend that you can have, the best friend that you can possibly have is as yourself. And if you are lying to yourself, you're a lousy friend. So too many of us choose to do that for the sake of some other physical gratification. And it all comes down from the basis of knowledge. These questions that we have that we can't answer, and we say, oh, we don't know, or we're not allowed to know. Well, the question comes, the easiest question is, why don't we know? And why aren't we allowed to know? And so the reason becomes the answer. And that's what we're doing with the plasma science, because now we can say, just a moment, we understand how energy is exchanged. So what we're saying is making sense. And when it's making sense, then we can extend that knowledge. And we can say, well, do I have to be there somewhere in outer space to know how it works? Let me just give you a specific example, because we were so fascinated with bringing artifacts. We brought up the subject of artifacts, bringing artifacts back from the moon, right? We sent an explorer there, it dug up the dirt and brought it back. And so that becomes moon dust, moon dirt, or whatever, moon soil. What is the composition of the moon? Is it going to be any different than the composition of the Earth? Based on the periodic table of elements? No. It's going to be exactly the same, because the universal laws with respect to the convergence and divergence of energy is the same. How do you know that? Because you can see the Earth, you can see yourself in the mirror, and you can see the artifacts in the sky. Do we understand what these artifacts are? Well, current knowledge says those are all stars. But you know, the sun is a star. And the sun is a whole lot brighter than those other stars. Well, I have not found a professor that could explain the difference and how that comes. So the only difference is, well, you know, the Earth is, you know, so close and the others are so far away. Yeah, well, we then introduced lasers. And we found that we could take a laser from the Earth and shine it to the moon. And that laser would have the same intensity as it arrived at the moon. Well, that kind of shoots that theory down, doesn't it? And that's the problem with theories. They only need to be disproven once. So we are living in a society with no answers. We're living in Canada, in my country, where there are communities that don't have clean, potable drinking water. We're fast approaching the year 2022. Are you kidding? Modern technology and you don't have clean, potable drinking water? That's unacceptable. That should be unacceptable to the community, but what can that community do when the current technology or the current society is unable to provide? So we shouldn't be patting ourselves on the back with respect to our advanced technologies, because we can't deliver the fundamental creature comforts that we need on this planet. And that's not a commentary, that's just an observation of fact. So when we build the cups of life, we find that we are able, for pennies on the dollar, to draw in energy and create something from nothing. Well, nothing is nothing. So where did that come from? All right. So in our range, it came from the air. Oh, okay. Well, where did the air come from? So then it extends. We find that the sun has a plasmatic field and the earth has a plasmatic field. And when two plasmatic fields interact, they create a dynamic plasma field. What do you need to know? We just need to hone our skills, become more skillful givers, and because we'll find that as we give, the universe gives, and the universe is bountiful. So you want to hitch your wagon to a loser, you go right ahead. When you want to hitch your wagon to the universe, then you will find that the universe gives you all the emotional and physical satisfaction that you need and all the vitality that you need. But, there's a responsibility, and that responsibility comes with purpose. So where too many of us in our society don't have a purpose, we get depressed, suicidal, trauma, stress, and all that other stuff. You find with the plasma science, we are now delivering peace and harmony. And there's opposition. Are you kidding? There's opposition to peace and harmony. Something's wrong with that picture. So let's understand as plasma scientists that we need to understand the rules of the universe. We don't have to go into the universe to understand those rules. We have them playing out in our cups of life, in the universal cup, in our social structure, in our family unit. First thing, we have to protect ourselves, protect our family, protect our community, protect our society, protect our earth, all right? And then that's the ticket into the universal community. So not only will we have a tiny, perfect world, but we will have a vast, perfect universe and share in that. And I think that is absolutely a wonderful vision. And I think all knowledge seekers are sharing that vision today.
I was thinking about the magician, where he takes one of these vertical boxes and he puts his assistant in it. And then he spins it around a few times and taps on it with his magic stick and opens the door, and the assistant is gone. Of course, this time in the vertical enhancement units that Mr. Kesh is delivering, if we open the door and the person is still there, this is not the error of the magician. Apparently, it's the soul that's not ready or mature enough to travel. And he said the soul of physicality wouldn't allow it, or something along that line. And many of us will be disappointed, unfortunately. He said the soul of physicality would something about the criminality of the soul. And we know our soul of the man is our closest friend that we have, Mr. Kesh said. And he said, this is the one that we've been stealing from the most. So if you can understand that, maybe that's some of the reasons. But then I was thinking, well, if you can't go that way, perhaps you can be processed in one of the other units to sort of work out whatever problems there are between the two souls. And again, I don't know the level of it, because it seems we all have a tendency to take from our soul. The soul of physicality has this tendency to do that. And hopefully in time we'll become perfect citizens. And he has alluded to this, whether we're in space or on this planet. So I see that vertical unit as sort of magician's box, but at the same way, if the door opens and the physicality is still there, it's not the fault of the magician. And of course, Mr. Kesh said, I don't do magics. My knowledge is my magic. And if you understand it, you become magician. So I think there's going to be a lot of wow factors going to be here on this planet when they start to see, and this is just the beginning of what's being rolled out by the Kesh Foundation.
Mark, if I can just add, if before you were born, there's a before, and then after you die, there's an after. So between the before and the after is our life, right? So, everyone needs to ask the question, how did you get here? And then where are you going? I think it's a logical question. Just because people can't answer that question, or, you have to go to some crystal ball gazer or some, voodoo scientist, and they give you some kind of explanation. So, okay, I can live with that. You don't have to live with anything. You just have to understand what the rules are. The rules of the universe apply to all of us. And you really have to ask the question is, if the universal rules apply to all of us, then how is it possible that we have 7 billion people on this planet? And that number is changing by the second, right? So there's more and there's less. So how can we all maintain our individuality in a universe that is universal? And so many of the spiritual people say, what you're seeking is the greater oneness. Well, what is that greater oneness? Well, it's the oneness, the interaction with the soul of the man and the soul of the body. That's the greater oneness. And we've seen with the book number 1, the creation of matter, we create the greater oneness. But with the universal, with book number 3, the origin of the universe, you see that 1 begets 2. And so we've seen through the nuclear decay, where the neutron breaks down into electron-proton combination plus a residue. But we see from the creation, we take copper plate and a nano-coated copper, and we create a GANS. So 1 and 1 is more than 2. And where did that come from? And so you have to know that it exists, and then when it exists, you have to look for the answer. So everything that we're talking about here is an assist to finding the answer. But the truth of the matter is, whatever we're doing is between here and there. So we are in the transition state, aren't we? We are the transition matter.
Yes, I was wondering what you meant by a face-centered tetrahedron. Is that something, is that common knowledge? I really haven't heard that term before. Tetrahedron I have, but face-centered tetrahedron, what does that mean?
Well, I was discussing the, this is an intermediate teaching, right? So in the basic classes, we were discussing hexagonal formats and three-dimensional objects like a cube. And if you look at the periodic table of elements, they have crystalline forces. So they form cubes and rhomboids and hexagonal formations and rectangles and all sorts of different formats. The points are your points as they are on the amino star, the points. But there's an interaction in between those points, which is the plasma field. So there is no point. So it's just like when you look at your star formation, what's in the center of your star formation is a plasma field. Well, that plasma field in a star formation would be body-centered. But the tetrahedron has 4 faces. So there's a plasma field that's possible to be in the center of each face as well. So you have a plasma field possibility in the face. You have a plasma possibility in the center. And then you have a progression where the plasma field from the center of the body can extend beyond. And that becomes a dynamic plasma.
And I just wanted to add that the KAKT Foundation is going to start or is in the process of recruiting top-level scientists around the planet, either from, I think Mr. KAKT has contacted some recruiting agencies. And we just want to reach out to those maybe at NASA or in the Russian agencies or the Chinese agencies that want to get away from maybe building systems that are destructive. I know when I worked in the aircraft industry, even though I was a young man, I had a very cold feeling about what I was doing. I was very well paid and taken care of very well, but I just knew what this system that I was building was eventually going to deliver. And that was death and destruction for the most part. There were some commercial aspects of it as well, but I just had a very cold feeling about it. And even the scientists at Los Alamos that are standing outside of Los Alamos now because of maybe a protest or a conflict in interest there, that they can also join. The KAKT Foundation is looking for top-level people around the world to start creating and building systems of peace rather than systems of destruction. So all the great minds, if you maybe you are being paid well and you're well compensated and all that, but if you know deep in your heart or in your soul that what you're doing is not correct, you can apply to the KAKT Foundation. And what would that address be again, Alex? Is it info? There was one that Mr.
Yeah.
KAKT mentioned.
I think it was info@KAKT.Foundation.
There it is, info@KAKT.Foundation. So you can send your resume there and may save us the recruiting fee perhaps, because I think that some of these agencies require quite extensive amounts of money to bring in good people, but you can come in on your own. And if you're very dissatisfied and you know deep down that what you're doing, as I experienced as a young man, that there is an alternative for you to channel your talents. I just wanted to put that in there. And of course, there is also I was just looking for this, a conference coming up, I believe it is this week. If I can just look for it here and bring it up for you. Let's see if we can see this. And we've covered this once before. Let me just share this, Alex, and we can go right back to your screen.
Not a problem. Just take it over, Mark.
Yeah, okay. And this is coming up. It's called Cosmic Consciousness and Disclosure, November 4th to 7th. I'm sure it'll be put in the chat so we can join Mr. KAKT and hear live what he's saying. I think it's the first or second day that he may be delivering some knowledge here. And so I just wanted to make everyone aware that this week, whoops, thank you. Okay, and here's two other guests coming in. So I just wanted to make everyone aware that it's this November 4th, I think is this Thursday. I don't have a calendar in front of me, but
yeah, it's Thursday, Mark. It's the same day as the 405th Knowledge Seekers Workshop.
Oh, well, he's a supreme multitasker, and I'm sure he'll fit both in if he's made commitments, and we know he hasn't missed one Knowledge Seekers Workshop. And
Mark.
Yes, sir.
Mr. KAKT will be speaking on 6th of November.
Okay, so that would be Saturday, Keaton.
Yes, Saturday.
Okay, is there a definite time so we could maybe mark it somewhere? And
Wait, I just check and let you know.
thank you very much. And of course, if you want to add anything here, we were asking if any of the Universal Council members wanted to add anything, which Shweta did. And I know Marie is here and now you're back. So if you'd like to add anything, we are grateful to the Universal Council for making these excellent wishes and bringing some of these systems to manifest in the matter state. And while Keaton's just checking the exact time. Okay, so no conflict with the Knowledge Seekers Workshop. And again, for
It
any,
is-
yes, go ahead, Keaton.
It is 10 a.m. PST.
10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time on Saturday.
Yes.
Okay, so if it's 10 a.m., it would be 3 hours ahead for me. That would be 1 p.m. Okay, and as we know, for any private students, the European Union has changed its time earlier this morning, and I think the American system will change next Sunday. So this meeting will start at the normal time, but during any classes this week, you may find you joined early or late because of the time change. So just keep that in mind this week, as the European Union is now only 5 hours ahead of the New York time for me, rather than 6. So just keep that in mind this week if you're attending any sort of, because we always, and it's been our tradition to key off the Central European time zone. Thank you, Kita. Is there anyone else? Go ahead. We've had a couple new people join us here. And again, I would just, if there's anyone here in the audience or participants that this is your first time here, we just want you to open your mic, say hello, your name, where you're from, and how you found this meeting. Thank you very much.
I have a question for Alex.
Good day, Jalal.
Hello, good day. Hi, everyone. Alex, how you know Mark is in the transition? Maybe he is new here, or he is enjoying.
Well, I hope he's enjoying. I hope you're enjoying.
Well, yeah, you know, we have the 3 stages, you know, the three books,
The Three Stooges, what?
stages, the 3 books.
Yeah, the 3 books. But, well, the thing is that we are actually none of those 3 stages, because the soul of the man is a universal traveler. So the 3 stages that we're talking about are specific to this planet.
Can you explain more, please?
Okay, well, to be in the physicality on this planet is, you know, the position here is in between being born and dying, if you will. But the being born and being dying is a physical manifestation. So being alive here in the physical sense is a physical manifestation. Up until now, that has been, you know, the only point of view. But that really doesn't make any sense. And so here's the reason for it. If we can, through being born, physically manifest, and then if we can transport ourselves physically to another location, and the way that we do it is through transmutation. So therefore, we transmute from a physical state to a soul state as an energy pack, transfer to another location, and then transmutate back into the physicality. So in other words, the regeneration, and gen was the key word today. The generation and regeneration means that not only can we regenerate back into the physical state, but would we regenerate back into a decrepit physical condition, an unhealthy physical condition. Because if we can regenerate into a physical condition in a different location through the plasma science, then literally we can regenerate ourselves from an unhealthy state to a healthy state. All right, so the possibility exists in between. So when Mr. Kesh makes a claim and he says we have the equipment to be able to regenerate, shall we say, a broken bone into a healthy bone within, you know, let's say less than 48 hours, that's a regeneration. So if we can transmutate ourselves from this physical condition here to a physical condition somewhere else, be it within this range or be it in another range, then it would be, by extension, physically possible to regenerate a broken bone into a healing bone. It becomes automatic. So whether it's done here or done there, it's the same action. And so this throws an entirely different light. So why are we not capable of doing this physical regeneration? So part of it is the self-inflicted soul limitations that we have placed on our physicality. So are they soul limitations of the soul of the man? No, the soul of the man doesn't have these limitations because the soul of man is a universal traveler. It's the soul of the body that has these limitations. And that is predicated on the kind of teaching that we've been doing. So we're trying to advance that teaching. And so we have a great many excellent teachers on the panel today. So, you know, like yourself and Marie and Stefania and the list goes on, Caton, and everyone here contributes in their own way with respect to their own understanding and with respect to their own environment. So by opening up a forum where we can talk about the advanced science with skill, with using the proper terminology in the proper context, then we can create the construct of ideas that then can manifest. And this is the road that we're on. And all of this equipment that we're getting is an assistance to overcome the limitations. And as we become more skillful, you know, you can't go from the, you know, junior leagues into the big leagues just overnight. There's no limitation on it. It all depends on how hard you work at it. But how hard you work at it is not translated by the amount of time. It's how open we are to the possibilities of the universe. In other words, how qualified are we as possibility generators? This really becomes the question. What kind of possibility are you generating? And how is that affecting your life? And are you seeing the results? And sometimes you really, really, really have to, you know, bring a magnifying glass to see the progress. But, you know, you don't have to grasp at the straws. They are there. And this is manifest through the peace dome. If you understand that this manifestation can manifest through the peace dome, then you understand the power of the plasma science. So the plasma reality manifests into the physical reality. So that's why the power of the plasma dome takes precedence. That's the understanding that we have to have, and then we can springboard from there. Is that better, Jalal?
That brought me to another question. You brought it to yourself, not me.
I'm listening.
So in this case, there is no other. What is NU?
I'm sorry, please repeat that.
In that meaning, there is no such a thing as NU.
Oh,
Totally new.
well, so in my humble opinion, I would agree with you. However, there is something we're going to talk about in the future, but Mr. Kesh is already talking about that the past 3 weeks. And that is that the alien aspect of us as planetary beings is the fact that we do have this duality where we can exist in a soul state and exist in a physical state. Now, we're not the only ones, but you know, there are many souls who don't want to exist in a physical state. And honestly, look around, can you blame them? I mean, who wants to come to this kind of, you know, calamity that we have here? However, it means that we have a purpose. And the reason in my opinion, is that the universal community needs us. And we are at that point where, you know, we kind of have to fish or cut bait. And, you know, we are endowed with an opportunity here where we don't have to take the technology and confiscate it for military purposes. And the reason for that is because the universal community will not fight. In fact, they will basically create a barrier and you will be lonely, very, very lonely. And that becomes one of the harshest, shall we say, punishments that you can have. And most of us are inflicting this punishment on our own, to ourselves, through our misconduct. And as we find out how this is, the closer we get to the truth, the greater the pain. And so what we really have to realize is that by changing our conduct and elevating our souls and allowing the welcoming of the energies from the universe and the bountiful energies and the beneficent energies from the universe to allow us to become universal functionaries. And as universal functionaries, we have to abide, shall we say, by the universal rules, not only in the universe, but in the physical system here on this planet. So the real questions that we're not asking, you know, is the universe really a multiverse? You know, and then we're coming up with, you know, things like the metaverse. Well, you know, there's a post-amino and there's a pre-amino structure. That's what we talked about today. And, you know, when man makes and decides on the rules, that's a post-amino acid structure. And the universal community does not operate that way. We are part of the universal community, and each one of us can write our own ticket right now. We don't have to delay. All we have to do is understand the possibilities and become possibility generators to fulfill our destiny. I hope that's a better answer.
You know, today your teaching was remarkably very good for me, because this week I was really studying the relationship between the amino acid and the matter state. And the question, we see the amino acid, what we call amino acid, it's coming from the interaction of the 4 field forces of sun and earth. what is the field of the sun? What is the strength of the field of the sun? If there are two field forces, I am not putting this question for you, Alex. I am putting this question for all of us to, to investigate, to think. Because what we call oxygen and carbon and nitrogen outside, this is in our atmosphere. But outside the atmosphere, I don't think there is oxide.
Yes, there is. It's in a plasmatic state.
And they call it oxide?
I don't know what they call it. The thing is that the denominator, the common denominator, is in the essence of the PM tick. When two PM ticks come together, they don't have to be the same. They just have to be common. They have to be common enough to come together. And the commonality here is the field force that is established by the relationship between the field force of the sun and the field force of the earth. It's the plasmatic field force that predominates and predicates. In other words, the field force of the sun and the earth and the interaction thereof is the pre-amino acid structure. It's the substructure that may or may not manifest into the physicality. So the sun does emit rays. It does emit light, right? And where does that light come from? And that light is magnetical, right? It has to come from a gravitational structure, doesn't it? Because it's emitting. And then what is the earth doing? It is absorbing. And that is the way it's done during the daytime. But what happens at night? Well, then the night, the earth is emitting, isn't it?
Wait.
And
The sun, in my understanding, the sun do not emit light. The light exists in the eye of the observer due to the environment. When there is interaction with another plasma, there will be light.
That's right. That is the physical manifestation of the plasmatic interaction of the fields.
So why you call it light? Call it a plasma.
Well, because in a physical state, we see the light, but the light is visible. So as soon as it's visible, you know it's in the physical state, and that's the point. It's a post-amino acid structure. So in a pre-amino acid structure, it has to be in a plasmatic state, and the plasmatic state is non-visible, non-tangible. But because it's non-visible or non-tangible doesn't mean it's not there, and that's the point. So, you know, when we limit ourselves to understanding to what we see and what we can touch, then we definitely limit ourselves to the magnetosphere, inside the magnetosphere of this planet. And clearly, when we look through the magnetosphere, we can see the rest of the universe. And, you know, we wonder, well, where did that come from? And how do we go there? And all we say is, well, I don't know. And it's, I don't know, year after year, decade after decade. Well, now we do know, because if we understand that if we want to go from here to there, something has to go from there to here. It's a two-way street. That's the magnetical gravitational relationship. And so our point of view has to adapt to that relationship. That's all it is.
Could I ask another question for everyone? Jalal, are you finished, or did you want to respond?
Oh, I will not finish. Okay, go ahead.
I wanted to know, Mr. Kesh said, if you go into this flight enhancement system and you come out, perhaps for 3 or 4 months, you may not need to take food. So I'm wondering if, so that's a lingering effect, I call it. So will also there be a lingering effect of the emotion of completeness, the condition of warmth, the idea that I have everything I need I don't need wealth. Will these fields or these interactions also linger? Or is it just the food? Maybe everyone can make a comment if they'd like to. He did specifically say the feeding would linger, that you would not perhaps need to take, I mean, you can take food if you'd like, but you wouldn't have that strong desire to take food, perhaps for months. Any comments from anyone?
So Mark, you live someplace, and there's a decision to move, and you don't want to move, right? You're really happy where you are, but then push comes to shove, you have to move, and then you go to this new place and you say, "Yeah, this isn't half bad," and why did I resist moving in the first place? So it was based on a interpretation of our belief. And so we had an opportunity to, shall we say, sample the new location. Well, when you're involved with the plasma science, you're hooked up with your soul. And the soul doesn't lie. So now you're exposed to the truth. If you're exposed to the truth, would you want to go back to these deceitful ways? Would you really want to do that? So this is what's confounding to me. When we are moving forward, why is there a resistance to moving forward? So for some reason, well, we do know the reason, but the thing is, it's a very selfish way to look at things. And it's a very short-term way to look at things, because when we look at, the zodiac, we see that we're talking about 2,160 years, and I don't think anybody here alive has that kind of watch on their wrist where they're tracking 2,160 years in multiple times. So whatever we're doing here today, like really in terms of time, is extremely insignificant. So if we are able to travel through the universe where time is significant, why would we want to come back? And until we experience it, until we become aware of it, and this is knowledge seekers, is what we have to open up to the possibilities. So,
Well, we're chameleons. We can operate in both. And I think this emotion of completeness is so precious that once you arrive there, as Mr. Kesh said, it's a no worry zone. When you get to that emotion of completeness, you're complete. You don't need anything from anywhere.
okay, so there's the answer.
But I mean, if you're going to the moon for an hour or Mars for the afternoon and so on, you're going to come back, most likely. The other passengers may need to come back and so on. Or you may need to come back and perform some other mission, perhaps. There's a problem here or there, or a fire, and you have one of the systems that needs to be deployed.
Okay, well, frankly, if you go, okay, and you leave this mess behind, so you would satisfy your own emotional and physical well-being. Okay, but the mess is still here. So who's going to clean up the mess? And how are we going to do this?
Jalal's going to clean it up. He's staying here for a little while.
Okay,
He's gonna
well,
be
that's
cleaning.
good, because I'm
I am the
sick
car
and tired
washer.
of,
I am the car washer,
I'm
That's why
sick and tired.
I equip today everything.
We all
I quit.
can't leave. We all can't leave. There needs to be people here to look after the people that are here and work with them and make sure they're looked after properly. You just can't all abandon the planet.
So there's different rates, and this was something that I spoke about a few weeks ago, the rate of change, right? So if we go into a higher field strength, then the transition state is also operating at a higher field strength by many orders of magnitude. That's why the plasma science is delivering peace and rapidly. far more rapidly than we can do it any other way. Well, my point is this, and this is the consternation. If we have an abundant number of men of peace on this planet, what's the problem? So the problem is that we really don't have enough people working towards peace, but it's changing, and we can affect that change by elevating into a higher field strength, and we are doing that. And the plasma peace dome is only one of the ways. There are many, many ways, and we're just starting to become aware. So I'm gonna leave it there.
Okay, I know Steph brought up before the meeting, I don't know if she's still here, but about this solar flare, and that she gave us a link in the chat about this X-class flare. As I said, I read a short article that said there's a C-class flares from the sun and an M-class flare, and then the strongest would be the X-class flare. I don't know if anyone knows anything about it, or if we should even go to that website, as Rick doesn't always like to play things from other locations. We want to keep it.
Anyone know why the sun flare? Plasmatically, not matter state. Why it's happened?
Why, you mean?
Yeah.
Because of the hole in the magnetic field?
Whole
Hole of the magnetic field. There is a hole in the magnetic field of the Earth.
No.
No, he's talking the sun.
I'm speaking about the sun.
Yeah, okay. I think maybe because of this, something changes. I don't know.
Yeah, ask yourself.
Well, we know the sun is not so emotionally balanced like the solar system, which is peaceful. The sun has quite a few emotional or energetic eruptions, let's say. And
Why-
obviously it needs to release energies.
What if it's a mother trying to give a burst of energy for someone in need?
Yeah, she's a mother and she's exhausted because of the.
Why exhausted? All these beautiful souls here, why exhausted?
Yeah, but the rest, the rest is more.
No, look, you are now different condition. You are in plasma condition. You need to see everything in the positive way. Everything is positive way, really. Before 1,000 years, we have killing all over every second. You cannot live for 20, 30 years. More than that, you cannot live. Look, now you are living 100 years.
Mm-hmm.
It's a luxury here now. It is the prosperity. Look to the communication line. Look to everything.
Yeah.
So why we look at that negative?
Yeah, she wants to destroy
Why?
the rest of the people, not us.
Why? No, really. Why this? What always we are telling, or we are trying to teach a positive way in thinking. And you really, if you think a positive way, you will find a lot of things. We are really in very good time. My God, we are the luckiest beings in the whole creation of Earth, or this solar system. Never there is such a information and such a knowledge and such an awareness.
And so completely delivered, ever been done before in the universe. Yes. Are you trying to bring Mr. Kesh in here?
You know, look, as he is here, let me ask him another question. Why didn't you answer my question? Before the teaching, I took a nap. Exactly 6:30 and the time I took a nap, and there. I am with him in not a teaching class in a way to understand. We was listening for something, and he was involved, but he wasn't talk. And I said, okay, Mr. Cash, I have a question for you. And really, I still have the question. And I asked him, but in a funny way, I always joke. He didn't answer me. And then he was like in the Zoom, and he said, I have to go. And then he closed, and I thought he's not answering a question in the Zoom or in this meeting. And he went out from the door, and I said, hey, where are you going? He said, go back. And he pushed me back, and he closed the door, and he went.
And this was a dream?
Yes.
Wow.
It was a beautiful one, but still, he didn't answer my question. And I will catch him again in one dream. He will not go away.
Okay, go ahead, Steph.
I don't know what to say. Sorry. Yeah, maybe he can answer.
Where was the, let me just see if the link is still here that you put in. Now, did you put in 2 links or just 1 link?
Yes, the first link was just the picture of it where we talked about, there was a picture from this Telegram canal. And the second one was a direct link for the whole Telegram canal. Yeah, right, the polar lights. I didn't know how to spell it in English. Island. Is it right? Island in English?
Yes, island.
Yeah, genau.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that is not typical that in islands these lights are now. It's just because it's so powerful, this sunstorms.
Can
You mean
see?
Iceland?
Iceland, right. And they talked, maybe you can see it here in Germany, in Europe.
Can you see it? Can you see the screen or no?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if you could see
Yeah, it was a green. Yeah, it's a green picture. Yeah, because they told maybe we can see it in Germany too, because it's so powerful. And yeah, but I didn't see. I was sleeping.
Alex, I got a question for you because I just caught you mentioning the 2,160-year cycle.
Hi, John.
I didn't get, what were you talking about then?
Oh, what was I talking about?
Yep.
Well, each sign of the zodiac is 2,160 years long.
Yeah, well, you got the Mayans. Have you ever heard of the Mayan calendar?
Yes.
Well, they've lived through 4 cycles of 2,160 years, and they're going into the 5th cycle.
So you really need a powerful spring on that watch.
It's a beautiful calendar. The knowledge they have in that calendar is fantastic. And they work on the Venus cycle also.
So the point is it exists, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, so who keeps track of that?
Or you could ask, I've got a box which got the explanation, but I studied that over 20 years ago. I can't remember much about it.
20
But,
years ago?
Yep.
Well, you're 2,140 years short of zodiac.
Yeah, well, I haven't managed to recuperate my connection with my original soul yet. But Moreno, like Hakahao, he can give you a better idea because he's in contact with the Mayan masters there in Mexico.
And so can Jose Gagueras.
Manuel Hakahao. I don't know if he's here. Let me see. No, he's not present today.
Oh, I see.
Jose has crossed the bridge, Alex. I
Miguel.
think he died a few years ago.
John,
Oh, wasn't
John,
aware.
it's
Yes.
Miguel,
Miguel, yeah,
Manuel.
Miguel Moreno.
Miguel Moreno.
He goes under the name of Miguel Lahacajao, which is a Mexican name also.
And we know there's a climate change conference coming up. Fried has reminded us about this conference, about the problems that are being put forward as a climate change. And I know Putin said he's not going to attend, and they don't think Xi Jinping is going to attend either. Is this more, and we know we have the solutions for the climate change, if it's even real, because obviously the climate, just like the hairs on one's head, is constantly changing. But we have the solutions and not implementing the solutions, so to speak. It's just using the systems that are being provided by the Keshe Foundation, such as cargo travel and other ones that will allow the planet to go back into balance. So we can
That's the next pandemia, Mark. We won't be able to use our cars anymore. Don't burn any more petrol.
well, we're getting away from wheels, John. You're just going to be,
Yeah, we are,
going-
yes, but the rest of the people, they've got to convince them to close themselves up, don't move anymore. As Mr. Kesh says, we'll find all those ocean-going containers full of petroleum dumped in the middle of the ocean.
yes, that's going to mean it seems like that means it's going to happen rather unexpectedly in a way. Everything will be in progress and so on. And why would they fill up these tankers? Or maybe they are sold once they're on the ocean and then it's someone else's problem. But they will be abandoned in quite a bit of ways. So it's not that this technology is all peaches and cream. This technology is going to create other problems that we're going to have to solve as well, like these ocean-going vessels that'll be abandoned, or unemployment as well.
Hi, this is Marie. Can you hear me?
Oh, clearly, thank you.
I have an attempt on an answer on Yalal's question about the field strength of the sun. I don't know if anyone answered it, but because I didn't listen 100%. But what I've learned from Yalal's teaching is that, and I believe that the sun is giving from its highest, so its principal field strength, like a mother, always giving the best to its her child, probably the father as well. So that is the answer to that, I think. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Marie.
Is the sun is the neutron or the sun is the proton electron?
You know, I remember Mr. Kesh talking about the proverbial question, which came first, the chicken or the egg?
But he
Any-
answered it, huh?
Any takers? Yes, he did.
Okay, let's ask the knowledge seekers here.
Well, we don't have to. They may go ahead if someone wants to. I'm just
This
This is Marie again. I want to answer.
Okay.
I think it's the I don't know if it's right though, but I just say it. I think it's the sun is the proton because it needs the electron to manifest itself and to show itself. So that's my answer.
You are answering the sun question?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. We thought you are answering the chicken and egg.
Oh, the chicken and egg. Yeah, I can't remember that one. Chicken and egg. Yeah. Okay.
You know, that old, who came first,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
chicken or the egg? You can't have
Yeah.
the egg without having the chicken, and you can't have the chicken without coming from the egg, right? So there's so much knowledge Mr. Kesh carries that it's unbelievable. We'll even be digging up artifacts that are buried in certain things and knowledges that only he would know about. There's so many things. And at some point, I think things are going to settle down, and hopefully he has the attention of the entire world at that point when he starts revealing some of these secrets. Because as we know, he's been walking on this planet for thousands of years.
Good afternoon, Mark.
Yes, Claudia. Hello.
Hello. I am in a basic knowledge yet.
Me too. Me too.
But I'd like to make a question for Alex.
Of course, anyone's welcome. Thank you, Claudia, for opening your mic.
I'd like that he speak a little bit about the transmutation a human being without feeling pain, because our bone structure is well innervated and linked to our emotion. So I would like that he speaks a little bit about it. Thank you.
Hi, Claudia. Thank you. So the pain is a physical manifestation. And there is a substructure that causes that manifestation. And so we have products like, for instance, the pain pen, which mitigates that. In other words, it either depletes the energy or converts the energy. So in a basic context, when we have this kind of pain, it is a knot, like you tie two strings together and you create a knot, and it's a intense binding. And the more intense the binding, the higher the pain, the sharper the pain. The revelation from the plasma science is that obviously a lot of pain comes from, say, physical discomfort. But the source of that discomfort may not be physical. And that's one of the revelations that has come by. So I want to give a case in point, and that is, let's say you are, let's say, building up say a certain problem, just for argument's sake. Let's say with your lungs, but your lungs may represent a manifestation from an emotional situation. But that emotional situation may not come from a current situation. It may come from a situation that may have happened years ago. And something could have happened which embedded a emotional manifestation. And that has transmuted into a disability. So we find two particular problems. One is trying to resolve a physical discomfort with a direct connection, ignoring the indirect connection. So if someone, let's say, for instance, were to go into a universal body enhancement unit without medical supervision, they could find that they go in with the intention and saying, well, I want to fix this particular problem in my body, not understanding that there's another remote connection. You know, this kind of misunderstanding really becomes exaggerated. Like one person told me they were in perfect health except for a little bit of diabetes. You know, having diabetes disqualifies you from having perfect health. Okay, hello. But you know, this is the kind of misunderstanding of what health is all about. And then the second thing is that the ability to become healthy could in itself create a delinquency. And the reason for that would be, hey, you know what, if I can go ahead and break my arms, you know, let's say, you know, many of you may remember Evel Knievel. I think one of his claims, although he was he jumped large spans with a motorcycle, he also, I think, held the world record in the number of broken bones that he had. And so that was the point of bragging. But he went through an enormous amount of pain in the process, there's no doubt in my mind. But imagine now you can break your bones, and going through some of these reactors, you can, you know, mend a broken bone in less than 48 hours. Oh, well, that's great. Then I can go out and break my bones the next day. Well, no, it's your responsibility for your own physical health. So, you know, there are accidents that happen through an incomplete awareness and an incomplete caretaking, right? And this is one of the things about the physicality. But if you have this ability to repair yourself plasmatically through a machine, will that eliminate your responsibility? And so this becomes one of the biggest problems. When we're talking about delay and consequences, we're talking about and gaining knowledge, then we understand that there's gaining the knowledge implies gaining responsibility. And so one of the hindrances to gaining knowledge is the lack of desire to take on responsibility. Oh, no, you know, I don't want that, not in my backyard. You know, that doesn't concern me, or just, you know, I just want my life warm and fuzzy. I don't want to know anything else. So these are the two factors. Having a misunderstanding of this direct relationship, cause and effect pain, or being able to be totally irresponsible with your actions and not you know, taking your due diligence, which is to, your job is to look after your soul, your physicality, and your manifestation and your conduct. That is all part and parcel of the whole thing. So those 2 points I just really want to emphasize. Thank you for your question.
Thank you, Alex.
Can I say something here regarding this question?
Yes, John. Yes.
You know, go to 2 cities. One city is very organized, and go to, let's say, one city, okay, because I lived in Germany and I lived in Iraq. Go to a city in Germany, because I witnessed that, and go to a city, for example, this is example, in, let's say, in Basra or any city from this kind. And make an accident, let's say in Stuttgart or München, and make accident in that city in Basra, let's say, what will happen? What do you think happen? If there is accident, let's say in München, in the street, because this city is well organized, so if there is an accident there, what will happen? All the roads, all the streets will be diverted, not for the other cars to come to this point of the accident. And we see all of sorts of rescues. The police is there, the ambulance is there, the fire department is there, and the electricity department is there, and the transport department is there. You know what they do? Catastrophe. Catastrophe, because they have such a fear of not disturbing the traffic. They make their own havoc, and you can sit there for 2, 3, 4 hours, and you know what? It is very small accident. One car just bumped the street ban, the Straßenbahn in Germany. Just a little bit, you know, if you push the car away, finish, nothing happened. And 4 or 5 hours we are sitting in the in the traffic. But go to another city, if the same accident happened there, nothing. They will deal with it as normal, and everything it will go as normal.
Like New York City.
You know, it's the same thing happened with the organized body, because he make the fear factor of the priority in the body. So anything, any touch, any not you know, the brain sending a signal to this area, and it have to receive it back. That is, everything is normal. When this signal cut, not go back, how many signals the brain sent to this area, how much he sent forces to deal with this position, because there is no back energy. The signal is cut. Something is wrong there. So what will happen? You will see all the body will react to this single point of pain, or we call it pain, or we call it lack of energy to the brain, but it's too much energy in the point. What the plasma do? Make back the signal, convert the signal from the position, bring back the signal to the brain, everything in control. You don't need to be in stress. You don't need to send all these forces and make problems with another areas, and you know, because he take from this position to help on this position. So he's lacking from one position, because this position is very, very important, because they do not send back energy, the signal with energy. So this is exactly what happened. The plasma, what you will do, it take all this havoc in the area and send back signal to the brain. Everything is in order. Just send a normal service, and we come over it, because all in the environment of the accident, they will take like a magnets, they will take another position, and this another position will affect another position, and this is the problem. The reaction, the factor of fear. But if you are in peace, so nothing wrong, it will fix itself. So they direct only a straight energy to the point, and direct energy in a way, a stronger one, a good one, because they know what is the problem. Everything is in order. All the other magnets in the position, because the plasma make the position. Voila. In 2 or 3 weeks, you need to fix this topic, you will fix it in 1 day. Because this problem, the body itself make it, trying to solve it, and he have priorities in this work. So you see the difference between the city and a lot of problems and a city without problems. They can deal with the situation. They do not make a lot of problem from it. But a city without a problem, if problem happen, oh my God, every city will be alert. And you see all the energies will goes all over, not directed in one big point. I hope I answered your question in a way, simple one.
Yes, Jalal, thank you. My teacher.
Thank you, Claudia.
Hello. And thank
Yes.
you, Alex, Mark, Jalal, and everybody for coming too. I have a comment and a question too. I don't know, maybe John helping me with the translation, the correct translation.
Your English is very good. Your
Yeah,
English
yeah,
is very good. But go
yeah,
ahead.
but
If John
this
is
one,
here
okay,
and you'd like to help
okay.
John, let's see if John is here.
Okay. And last Monday,
I've just arrived, yeah.
Thank you, John.
okay, John, mira, el lunes pasado, recién me había acostado porque asisto a la clase con Jalal y de repente escuché una voz, desperté así de repente. Yo quiero que me expliques todo lo que voy a decir porque necesito hacer una pregunta al respecto.
No, déjame explicar la cosa. Last Monday, when we had Jalal's teaching and finished, was your Lizzie was speaking? No, I didn't have a look. You had a nap.
Eran como las 5:30 de la mañana y
Sí.
alguien me habló, me desperté deprisa y había muchos truenos frente a mi puerta y muchísima lluvia.
Somebody spoke to her. She didn't know where the voice came from, but there was a very big storm outside.
Y de inmediato hablé con mi alma, pedí permiso y pedí permiso a todos los GANs que hubiesen cerca de CO2 y de Copa de Vida 1 para que por favor nos ayudaran a que el clima no cambiara, sino equilibrara y de pronto se moviese un poco más a donde pudiese hacer menos daño. O sea, se desplazara un poco los truenos, los rayos y la lluvia donde donde no hubiese mucho daño.
Yeah, Lizzie immediately got in contact with her soul, or spoke to her soul, and asked her soul to get in contact with all the Ganses, so she could, these Ganses could equilibrate the storm, so it wouldn't be very hefty on part of the place and another not so hefty on another part.
Yo sentí de inmediato que los truenos sí se fueron desplazando a otras partes, inclusive el agua terminó muy poca ahí, pero se escuchaba en otras partes.
The lightning moved to elsewhere, and what the rain was ameliorated and went elsewhere. She could realize it went elsewhere.
Eso lo hice pensando en lo que habíamos hecho cuando hubo el incendio en Brasil, en Sao Paulo, que hicimos ese tratamiento y al otro día empezó a llover.
The same thing happened in Brazil, where there were some big forest fires, and we got together and managed to displace the fires through rain. The big rain came along and quenched the fires there.
Mi pregunta es esta. Yo comenté en un chat y alguien me dijo, pero es que recuerden que no se puede, se hace una vez, pero no se puede seguir haciendo. Entonces, mi pregunta es esta. Una cosa es una práctica, tú haces una práctica con las manos para aprender. Otra cosa es algo que tú haces para que esto suceda. Si se hace una vez y no se puede volver a hacer, es lo que quiero saber. O sea, ¿cuál es la diferencia entre, por ejemplo, practicar con mis manos, que él nos está enseñando a practicar con las manos, a tú saber que algo da resultado y lo haces para que dé el resultado?
Fine. What Liz is asking is, because we're told we can practice working with our hands, but we shouldn't overdo it. We could practice once or twice, but don't have a habit of changing a certain weather or whatever you're trying to influence. Are we supposed to not continue practicing, or can we go on doing these experiments?
Porque para mí no es práctica ni es experimento, es algo que sabemos que sí da resultado. Quiero ver si estamos haciendo mal o estoy haciendo mal.
What
Thank
she'd
you.
like to know is if can we continue the experiments? She knows they're not experiments. She's having good results, but can we continue using these powers? Let's put it this way. Who's going to answer this? Jalal, Alex, or whom?
I don't know. Because lo que quiero saber es por esto, porque, por ejemplo, ese día que escuché las voces y antesito de la clase de Yalal, nos enteramos que mi hermano mayor murió de un paro cardíaco. Asumo que fue él, porque a esa hora se levanta y que vino a despedirse quizá. Y de inmediato que yo lo supe, yo le dije, le entregué de mi alma para que ayude a la suya al proceso que está haciendo. Le entregué, pero entonces me quedé preocupada. O sea, sabemos que eso da resultado, pero si, entonces no podemos hacerlo. O sea, igual que mi alma con la de él no está correcto. Es lo que quiero saber. Sorry. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Last Monday, when this happened, that she heard that voice, just when there was this big storm, there was a coincidence that her brother died that same moment, and she didn't know if that was sort of the soul of her brother's calling out for her or what, but she got to know about this later on. And what she wants to know is, can she continue experimenting with these forces or powers, or should she stop doing so?
Me parece que no, pero pues necesito estar segura. Hello, Lizzie, can you hear me? Hello?
Very, yes, better, yes, but
No.
very faint way.
Okay. Now can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, beautifully.
Okay. I'm saying to Lizzie, my dear Lizzie, if it's doing good, then it is not power, it is just feel strength, and you can continue doing good for others, for every situation. You don't need to ask anybody. And I'm sorry for your brother, but these are not experiments. These are your level of understanding and your point of view and the wish you take. That is it. It is energy in charge. It is always continuous. This is always flowing. So you have to do that if you seek that this is the need of that moment. We all do that. We are all doing that in this beautiful knowledge. We know, as we are all knowledge seekers. Okay? Is that okay? Thank you. Thank you so much. Because in this day, for the notice with my brother, antes de que le dieran la noticia a mi madre, puse spray en mi copa de vida, puse zinc, hablé con los GANs de zinc, les pedí que me ayudaran con mi madre para que estuviera tranquila. Le puse a mi madre porque ella todo el tiempo está usando los GANs. Can you translate? Sorry, John? Okay. When before give the notice for the pass away my brother to my mother, I talked with the zinc GANs plasma water for the please help him with my mother for the notice because before no and put spray the head for my mother. She all the time put the plasma water, so I put it. And when my sister come and talk with her about my brother, she say, "Oh, thank you, God, because him no suffering. Him is good for because it's better. It's better. I'm sorry, better that. And that time." I don't know, understand me, so. Yes.
Yes, it brought peace to your mother and accepting that her son.
Very
yes.
nice, all the time. And she different times say, "Oh my God, I am very strong because accepted." I said, "Yes, Mom, but I don't talk with her about the zinc because I wait more time. But all the time, she's very strong now, not crying, nothing. And say, thank you, God, because it's not gone to the, no, it's not better, not, I'm sorry. No estuvo enfermo y por un paro cardíaco no fue a la cama, sino murió de inmediato. So, de immediately dead. She's not happy, but she relaxed with the situation. She's calm with this.
Her brother died instantly. He didn't suffer. He got a heart attack and went away.
Sí, ella, como le puse el zinc, estaba tranquila todo el tiempo, pero yo no le volví a poner. Solo en ese momento le pedí el zinc and that's it.
In that moment, she asked the zinc oxide to act towards her mother, and that helped her out very much so.
Yes, I read that when she put that in one of the chats, and I was touched by it as well.
Yes, thank you so much for the answer. I understand this. I need continue work with my soul.
Okay, we're approaching midnight in Europe, and I want to respect everyone's time, especially the Europeans, and thank everyone for joining us today. Is there more we can add? Mr. Kesh has gone out, but many times he returns. But there are two clips I want to play from, well, the 404, where he's reaching out to the religious leaders, and also the clip on from observer to space traveler, which is about 13 minutes. And the clip I want to play, reaching out to the religious leaders, is about 10 minutes. So if we were to do that, it would bring us right about to midnight, but we can go on, or you can leave if you have to leave. There's no obligation here.
Mark, I just want to thank everybody for attending the North American Corona International Team meeting and allowing me to make another presentation today. And I want to thank all the participants for making this another wonderful day in the universe. I look forward to seeing you all next week. So I'm going to sign off on this. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Alex. Regarding what Lisi brought, this is for all knowledge seekers. No one can judge you ever. You are the only one who can judge herself, that the man himself. Always ask yourself, because you are working with a higher level, and this is your soul. Always ask your soul to guide you to make the good things. Sometimes go a little bit here wrong, sometimes go a little bit right here, but always, always don't abuse the knowledge you have. Always give unconditionally, and even when you're doing unconditionally, don't put the condition. Think good and speak good and do good. That means you put your thinking in good things. If you divert something from its place, you are taking a responsibility of that. If there is a good things in it, you will get it. If there is a bad things in it, you will get it. That's why we said when you practice this sort of energy with the hands, you are elevating yourself from the matter state to the level of the fields. And then you go from the level of the fields of the hand to the level of the fields of the emotion. And then from the level of the field of the emotion to the fields of the soul. The teaching about the fields, not the matter state. And I think now we are aware about everything we are doing, not to receive in reality in physicality. We are trying to elevate the others and ourselves to do the good things. So only you can judge yourself. And don't let anyone judge you. So whatever you do, keep it with yourself. Unless you bring it as a teaching. There's a huge difference between teaching things and showing things. So I hope you understand what I'm saying. Thank you. Thank you, Alex, Mark, everyone.
Right, Mr. Kesh says, try to be humble, not to become arrogant in the power and the knowledge that you understand and possess. Otherwise, you'll end up in the same position as the church and the mosque. Okay, I'd like to play this 10-minute clip and then, of course, from observer to space traveler. And as Mr. Kesh said, what we have promised, we have delivered. And as we know, for many thousands of years, we look to the heavens and the skies, wondering how.
Why don't you bring the circle of life?
Excuse me?
Circle of life. Circle of creation.
Oh, I already had planned to play this, but if you have it queued up.
I don't have it.
You can play it.
I don't have it, but it's okay. Next time.
Okay, and for any private students, the private classes will start tomorrow at, it's 10 a.m. CET time in the 676 room. So if anyone is here, just letting you know that there is a private teaching, and Jalal is conducting this particular class called Deciphering Knowledge Seekers Workshop.
Thank you, Mark.
Of course, it's all of us now. As Mr. Kesh said, we all thank Mr. Kesh, thank Mr. Kesh. He said it's not me anymore, it's all of us. So it is all of us in one family as we move and communicate and do our work together. It's not just one anymore, it's all of us. So whether it's in Mexico, Brazil, and we're all combining this into the one nation, one planet, one race for world peace. But there are a couple ends.
So say it. Thank we.
Go ahead.
So say it. Thank we.
Oh, thank we. I think Steph just put that in the chat.
Right, it's from the German team, but Andreas was
yes, I think it was Jalal that coined that expression.
Oh, okay.
Oh, it's Andreas.
Okay.
Yeah, Andreas, you know.
Very good. Let's hear Mr. Kesh reaching out to the religious leaders, because they seem to be, in a way, dragging their feet as well. And then we will play from observer to space traveler, which again, this is what has been promised and this is what has been delivered now. It's no more talk, he says. Now we're actually going to start using these systems. The time of talking is over. Anyone else want to add anything else before, because I'll play these two clips and then I'll play the final disclaimer and then the meeting will end. So is there anything else that anyone else wanted to bring up or something you'd like to say? Please feel free.
For Alex, I send you a message, please. See it.
Okay, not hearing any responses. We will go, I think, right into this. Let me just check my timestamps. Okay. All right, very good. Here we go. And so this will be about another 24 minutes and then the final disclaimer and then the meeting will end.
One second, Mark, please.
Oh, please go right ahead.
No, it's just Jalal on what you sent a message.
Here, private message in the chat here. In this chat.
Why don't you just call him on the soul phone?
I don't know why I don't have it.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. Yeah, you said it. It's really funny. When Mr. Cass said a dog from China and a dog from America and a dog from Asia, they can speak the same language.
Exactly.
So why